Canada, always a pleasure when on the Hugh Hewitt Show I can welcome Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma, one of the great stalwarts and lions of the Senate. Good morning, Senator. Great to have you back.
Oh, good morning. Good morning, Hugh.
You are the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and boy, do we need you where you are right now with the National Defense Authorization Act. I'm going to start small and go big. Small, there is a part of the NDA called the Military Aviators Cancer Incidence Study that Senators Feinstein and Cornyn want done in order to study whether or not military aviators of all branches and all sizes of airplanes have a higher incidence of cancer. Are you supporting that? Do you think that will get into the final bill?
You got to keep in mind, Hugh, this is something that came up at the very last minute. None of us were even aware of that, and I applaud both Feinstein and Cornyn for doing it. But they say that they have reason to believe that it does, the military aviators may be at a higher risk for cancer than general population. So we have a section in there that does deal with that. We will get to the bottom of it. We've already started our study on that, but that was kind of a last-minute surprise. And we didn't know about that until it got to the floor. The answer is yes.
I'm glad to hear the chairman is behind it. Now, let's go to the military generally. President Obama was not, I tell him he was the worst president for the military. Nobody believes me. And I point out that President Trump and you have been rebuilding the military. Can you contrast those two?
Oh, yeah. And see, people don't understand this, and a lot of people don't believe it. When I talk to groups that are not really plugged into this thing, they don't realize that during the Obama administration, during the last 5 years, that would have been fiscal 10 through 15, he reduced the military down by 25%. We're talking about his budget. We're talking about the budget that was left. Now, keep in mind, during that same period of time that he reduced our military budget by 25%, Russia increased theirs by 34%. China increased theirs by 83%. Now, you stop and think about that. And that's the reason they got ahead of us. That's the reason that we found ourselves in a situation where we didn't have the things that they had, and we had to really get busy. That was a serious situation. So we now have corrected that. We are probably another year away from getting to the point with hypersonics and some of the systems that we have that where they actually pass us up. So we're on a roll right now, and you know, if we had had Hillary instead of Trump, I really wonder. Kay and I have been married 60 years. We have 20 kids and grandkids, and I think about them. Where would we be today if that hadn't happened?
I tell people there are enormous differences between a Navy that's only at 300 now, but on the way to 355, and a Navy that was at 282. I don't know if you have a top 10 differences, but you could just run through the 10 differences that Trump and Hillary have made, and the United States is secure today because she didn't win and he did.
Oh, well, that's true. Well, if you go through and you see the defense things, first of all, we increased defense spending because we've already talked about where China was and where Russia was. The prioritization of advanced weapon systems and development, that's something that we are doing. Hypersonics, I've already mentioned that. Long-range precision fires, that's why we've got to get caught up in those areas. North Korea halted nuclear testing and long-range missile launches, withdrew from the failed Iran nuclear thing. You've done a real good job, by the way, in talking about that. That's one of the things that people forget about, where Iran was and what they did to us in that. Increased the European NATO contributions. He's working on that. We hear about that every day. Space Force Command, which is something that at the first I thought maybe that wasn't necessary, but on the other hand, when all our competition has one, psychologically we needed to do it, and it's turned out to be the right decision. Withdrawing from the INF Treaty, modernization of the nuclear triad. You might remember nuclear modernization was down in the dumps, and this idea that you don't need a triad, one will be fine, you don't need three. And that was the attitude at that time. Let me mention one other thing, if you'll just tolerate me just for a moment.
Sure.
Because one of the things that you talk about and I talk about when you talk about the top 10 accomplishments that Trump has is what happens on energy. That's just 1 out of 10. But on that, I also have a top 10 energy wins. We are now a global leader in oil and gas production. Our crude oil exports are up exports are up 277%, natural gas exports 52%, coal exports 132%. We opened up Anwar for drilling, okay? Withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement. Trump repealed Obama's Clean Power Plan. The approval of the Keystone and the Dakota pipelines, the repealing of the Obama's Waters of the U.S. rule. That Waters of the U.S. rule would make my state, my arid state of Oklahoma, a wetland. And the last one, the 10th one, is the CRA. This is one of the things that you have to give credit to Kennedy. He was one of that came out with this thing. He said, we've got to increase revenue. The best way to increase revenue is to reduce the marginal rates. And he did this. In fact, he said, and this is a direct quote, he said, I think I can get this right. He said, we have to have more revenues for the Great Society, and the best way to increase revenue is to reduce marginal rates. He did that. Unfortunately, he died before that he realized that. But this president did it, and the reason, and I've said this several times, if it hadn't been for the problem that we're having right now with the COVID and all that, we have the best economy we've had in my lifetime. And
Yes.
and you stop and think about where would we be today if we'd started with an average economy. So the CRA, the difference that he did was and this is something we worked on together before he was actually before he defeated Hillary, and that was to get the regulations down the same as the rates down, and that's actually what did that. There's one. Let me mention one rule that even you might have forgotten about. Back during the Obama years, one of the rules that he had was that if you are a domestic oil and gas company and you're competing with China or somebody else, you have to give them the whole set as to how you calculated your competition. Well, that gives them a decided advantage. And so the first thing when this president was elected that I did was introduce a bill to repeal that particular regulation. And the president, that was the first signing ceremony they had. So I was very excited about that.
The CRAs were so important. The WOTUS rule, I spent 35 years when I was not retired dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers, EPA, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's a destructor. I mean, it's a destroyer of the economy. But, Senator, I have been characterizing the Democrats as committed to hack, pack, tax, and slash. Hack the filibuster to pieces, pack the D.C. statehood, pack the Senate, pack the Supreme Court, raise taxes and slash defense spending. Do you think the filibuster is dead if the Senate flips to the Democrats?
Oh, I think that's the first thing they try to do. Put themselves in a position where they would have complete and total control. And you just think about how we opened up this conversation as to what the last Democrat president did. This is exactly what you'd see. You know what they're going to do. And so the answer is yes.
And then I do believe that the House voted for Democratic for statehood for D.C. I think they would add Puerto Rico. They think they will get 4 Democratic senators. And I do believe they would expand the Supreme Court, Senator. Do you agree with me?
Well, I think they do that. Obviously, the 4 senators, that's something that they don't even deny in terms of what they'd be in a position to do if they have the total control. You stop and think about how close we came. Stop and think about where we would be today if Hillary had won that race in terms of just the military and energy. Those are the 2 big areas that it would have just destroyed America.
So last question. You've known Joe Biden a long time, and he's a friend of yours, I'm sure. The Senate is a very collegial place. Do you think he's lost his step? I mean, they're protecting him from debates. They're trying to end the debate. Do you think he's lost his step?
Well, yeah, obviously he has. And I think that their big job is to try to, he's kind of the man in the basement, and they're going to do the best they can to make it, but somebody else is going to be doing all the thinking. He didn't used to be that way, and you're right. He is a friend of. He and I both had similar tragedies in our families. We got to know each other well, but he needs to get back and do what he enjoys doing, whatever that is. But however, we'll wait and see what happens on that. It's the answer to your question would be no. He's not capable of doing that anymore.
I appreciate your candor, Senator, and I hope you keep coming back. Thank you for supporting the aviation study as well, and for leading the defense effort as Armed Services Chair. You've done a great service to the country. I appreciate it. Keep coming back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hey, America, don't go anywhere.